Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, and perhaps even good evening. Thank you so much for dropping by and joining me for this exciting, hopefully very chilled out, hopefully informative, and hopefully working session of how to use Substance Painter and Daz Studio together to combine them to do a little bit of exciting face and body painting. We have a full house. This is awesome. And Jeff, I'm so sorry to hear about your lawn. I mean, there is the no mowing thing, but I hope it's going to be okay. I hope it's going to survive. 40 degrees in much of Northern Europe. That is quite impressive. I believe in the UK, they're about to, or have already issued something like this is way too hot type warning. That hasn't happened in years. So one of those things. I hope you're all going to go and survive it. No exploding hair, Nate. No. Speaking of Nate, as well as Brian, and well as Julia, thank you so much for being here. Those are my moderators today. And they're going to help me post links and answer questions and also collate your questions that you might have. I'm kind of known to get into the zone every so often and disregard the chat. This is in no way meant as a disregard of you. It just means I'm kind of in the zone and I can only read so much of the chat. But usually I watch the streams back, and that's when I get the full context of what you guys are all talking about. So please chat away and ask all the questions that are burning in your minds right now. My moderators will be kind enough to collate them on a list, and then towards the end, if I don't answer them in between, I'm going to go and have a little Q&A session at the end. So anything that you want to know, just drop and ask. If it's not Substance Painter related, doesn't matter. If it's Daz Studio related, I'm your man. The Changeling Chick is here. And Ascania, my goodness, we have a full house. This is exciting. Let me show you what we're actually going to do today. So I'm currently playing a game called Horizon Forbidden West. I've played Zero Dawn as well. I really like that. But in Forbidden West, all these characters, that's on the PlayStation 5, that's arrived this week. I'm super chuffed that after months of waiting, I've got a PlayStation 5 and I can play this at a really high resolution. And this is what these characters look like. These are some screenshots I took this morning. This is Aloy here. This is the main character, and it's just a great example of how I believe the team from Guerrilla Games have applied all these paint strokes onto the character. So much like on the Genesis characters, we have the regular skin underneath it, and then you can apply these face paints. And in Daz Studio, we have multiple ways of making that happen. So I thought I'm going to get some inspiration here, and we can kind of look at these types of paint strokes that they've made, and we can try to recreate them inside Substance Painter. Also, what I didn't know, those are 4K screenshots, by the way. If you look closely, and I don't know how well this comes out on the stream, Velis hair. Crazy good, isn't it? I didn't know that they did that on game characters. I had no idea. But when I looked at it closely, I was thinking, hang on a minute, that's just like 8.1 Velis hair. How exciting. One of those things. And it's dynamite hair, Ascania. It is so good. The way this is animated in the game, absolutely cool. If you haven't played the game, check out some streams. Treat yourself to Horizon Zero Dawn on PC, or if you do have a PlayStation, then grab the latest version, which is Horizon Forbidden West. It's a really cool game. Unbelievable story. I'm really hooked, and I'm also hooked on the beauty that the game presents. So this is one example, but I have several others. This was Aloy in Las Vegas. Let me see. This is her kind of in the wilderness here. I didn't do depth of field. I did that later in Photoshop. So hence the outline isn't quite perfect here, but that's another interesting kind of body paint. It's fairly simple to do as well. Just put the paint strokes on, then have different layers of paint, and I'll show you a couple of ways of how to make that happen. This one is another one that is like decidedly German, I think. I have to say, very cool. So black, red, and yellow, or black, gold, and yellow, I believe we used to call it. This one's a simple one as well. But I'll frequently go back to these, and then we'll go and see if we can get some inspiration. There are also nice expressions there. Oh yeah, red and white. So nice color scheme. I don't think more than 2 colors is what I like to try. And then yeah, sour expression. But again, 2 colors and some just some triangles here. Another one that isn't about Aloy. This is from the other kind of characters. This is, I believe, a trader that we meet out in the wilderness. He's also got some great stuff. And some of these characters, they also have that applied all over the body. So these are kind of a mixture of tattoos as well as face paint. But in this guy, we can see that it's not just color information that is added there. So we also have something like height information, and we also have roughness information. And this is all paintable with Substance Painter. So I'll focus mainly on how to bring these maps into Substance Painter, how to put some paint strokes down, how to get it out so that we can use it on not just one character, but on multiple characters in Daz Studio. What else we got? What else we got? We have, oh yes, some other secondary characters. This is also stuff you can do. I don't know if I'm going to touch on that, but this is a good use of alphas here. If you don't want to do freehand paint strokes, you can also do something like that. So I'll see if I remember how to do that. If not, then, you know, one of those things. Does she ever have a clean face? I don't think so, Ascania. One other guy I wanted to show you, this Kotalo, another character we meet. This is him. He's from the Forbidden West, so he has this face paint all over, and I think that's kind of nice. So I'll do a mixture of all these things and see if I can get inspired. And what I like is that you can kind of see his regular skin popping through, and that it's not perfect. So it's not something that is, you know, that's perfectly applied. There we go. That is the plan. Let me go and put on some music, because that is nice. Music, there we go. Maybe this one here. Let's see if we can hear it. I can hear it. If it's too loud, do let me know. If it's too quiet, do let me know. Let's get going. So much cocaine, that is terrible. Mr. Freeze, yes. Ouch. So we have a bundle on sale right now that I'm actually pleased to say Camilla has done one of the promos for, which is really, really cool. It is the Necromancer bundle. There it is. This is what it is. And I think you get 45% off right now, and you get a ton of good stuff. You get the Necromancer himself with a bit of an outfit, and this is the character that I'm using. It would be great to have like a darker skin character, because the paint strokes usually come out more vibrant on those. You get a dragon, which is exciting. You get the Necromancer outfit with that. You also get some funky little gear here, always good for fantasy renders, and some textures, I believe, for the gear. This here is a crazy, creepy dragon that comes with the bundle. I don't think he's based on the Genesis figure. That's a standalone figure, I believe. Or is he made on Genesis? No, I don't think so. But this is the Necromancer running away from him. Very, very cool. I think, did you say, Camilla, that this is the promo that you made? Absolutely. Christina, welcome. Wonderful to see you. Yes, I think that's the one that you said you made. And this is the HD version of the Necromancer. I might actually use that for our demonstration. And I think that's the Necromancer outfit. This Skull Castle by Polish. Very, very cool. This is just that in conjunction with the product we were talking about earlier, Camilla. My goodness, that'd be good, wouldn't it? The Mega Terrain, I believe, from Ravenlaw and Kindred Arts. Can't wait to try that. I'll put that in the middle. This is one of Corm's characters you get as well, and he's applied some face paint here. I don't actually know if he's used Substance Painter for that, or if that was a Photoshop job, but these are essentially LIE overlays. I'll show you how to do that. I'll also show you how to do geoshells from our painting information, so that you get the height information in there as well. You get a ton of good stuff. Whoops, that is all that's in the bundle, so think about it. Good stuff. Let's get going. So the way to get our character out of Daz Studio and into Substance Painter is by way of exporting it as an OBJ. Oh, did I say I wanted to use the HD version? Yes, I did. Let's go Necromancer HD. 8.1. So that's another interesting question we had earlier. We know how. So the difference between the 8.0 and the 3, as well as the 8.1 characters, is that we have one additional surface on the body. So one extra UDIM tile that's been split out, so that you have not the body and the back of the head on the same texture. You have those split out as two textures. So you have one for the body, one for the face, that is also applied on the ears and on the lips. And then you have one for the back of the head and for the neck here. So that's been split out. And I'll show you how to deal with 8.1 characters. So the way to deal with those is the same as with 8.0 characters. You just have one additional surface to take care of. Oh, is it Changeling Chick? I didn't know. That is that's a Genesis 8 male character. That's amazing. That's cool. I have to check him out. And I do agree with you, geoshells look the best. They give you that extra advantage. So I'll show you these things 3 times, how to bring this back. I'll show you how you could replace once you've got the textures from Substance Painter, once you can replace these textures here directly on the character, you can do that. But that's not that smart, because you could probably only get away with the paint information, with the color information. But if you needed height information and glossiness information, that's difficult to replace that on the existing character. So what we can do is either use the layered image editor to add something on top of it and let Daz Studio deal with mixing two textures together or multiple textures together. Drawback is it works well for regular color information. It doesn't work great if you have height information, and it also presents a problem performance-wise. Daz Studio isn't great at dealing with the layered image editor. It works, but it takes kind of a while to get those images rendered or to kind of combined, and it may interfere with some of the surface properties that your character already has. So that's why, like Changing Chick said, geoshells are the magic. That is essentially, well, you can see it as an additional material that's kind of wrapped around an instance of your current characters with the same material zones that's wrapped around your character, and that stands a little bit away from the character, but it has its complete own material configuration, so you can add any kind of material that you want on there. So I'll show you how all these things work. First of all, let's go and export this guy. I'm going to have to do this twice because I'd like for reference to see his maps inside Substance Painter, but I'd like to use kind of a low-res mesh that doesn't have material information, and that's just because Substance Painter is a little quirky in the way it deals with the surfaces. So let me do this twice. I'm going to go and head over to File, Export. I'm going to do this in high res. Basically, as the character comes with him selected, I will go and, didn't I have something on my desktop here? Face painting stream, that's the one. I'm actually going to go and put this onto my quick thingy menu here, quick access, so that I can easily navigate there. There it is, so it's not going to go away here. So I can go and navigate here, and I'll go and make a new folder in here. I'm going to call that one OBJs, just so that I know what it is. In here, I will call him Necromancer, and I'll say with mats. And that's just so you know that I know what that is. I'll say save. And in the export options for the first export, I'm going to go and use the Daz Studio preset here at 100% scale. That's all good. And I will leave this here under filter objects. I'm going to tick that. Marvelous tip from Chris Cox, by the way. Chris, if you're here, welcome, by the way. If you tick that, then you don't have to make the what's it called here, the eyelashes and the tear ducts and stuff invisible. If you do this, then only the Necromancer is going to be exported, no parented items like clothing or anything. So tick that. And under here, under right surfaces, I'm going to use not the original ones. Those would just reference the path to his textures in my content library. I'm going to go and select this here, collect, and that will make me a new folder inside my OBJs folder in which his maps are going to live. So that's going to be very helpful when we pick him up with Substance Painter. Hit accept and export that out. Necromancer Salamander Hybrid, yes, possibly. And sorry, good evening, welcome. Good to see you. So that's number one. Number two will happen in base resolution, because Substance Painter kind of, you know, likes lower type resolution than higher ones. So I'm going to go over on my parameters tab, and I'll head over to mesh resolution and switch this from high resolution to base resolution, especially on a HD character like him here. That's going to be helpful. And on my surfaces, so Substance Painter has this habit, I'll say, that for each of these surface zones that we have here, arms, body, cornea, ears, and all these things, it would create a whole texture set. So in our case, we have 7 UDIM tiles, and we would get essentially a set for each of those for each surface, even though that's not quite necessary. If we'd import this with these surfaces, then Substance Painter would give us literally 150 maps, and that is really difficult for us to deal with, so we're not going to do that. I'm going to export him out without the surface information, but I'll do that on the export dialogues. Something else that I'm going to switch this over to wire shaded. Something else that Substance Painter prefers, in fact all 3D rendering engines prefer that, they don't get a quadrangulated mesh. So the Necromancer has a good mesh. He's based on Genesis, and that's a quad mesh. Ideally, the Substance Painter would like a triangulated mesh. So kind of optional, but we can do it by heading over to Edit, Object, Geometry, Triangulate. And when I do that, the geometry gets mangled a little bit. but Substance Painter kind of prefers that. It has to do something with the way the normals are rendered. So it's one of those things, let's do it because that's kind of, you know, good practice, I guess. Let's head over to File, Export again, and export him out now as the triangulated guy. And I'm going to call him Necromancer Nomads. And that's with a C, not with an S. There. And the export options are pretty much the same, except I'm going to untick this here, the right surfaces. I'm going to untick that. And the rest, I'm just going to go and leave as it is, as I had it before. So once again, select the roots, hit accept. And that's our work done in Daz Studio. So now we can go over and go into Substance Painter and put some paint strokes on it. Scrooge 2.0. Didn't they have a Scrooge, I believe, for Christmas? I think there was a Scrooge on the Daz store, wasn't there? I believe. In last year's bundle, I thought so. I thought so too, indeed. Kemi, no, good question. Do we need to export the Geoshell? No, we haven't made it yet. The Geoshell is something that we're going to create later. We don't have one yet on our character, so we're going to create that later, and we're going to apply the materials on it. That's how that's going to work. And John, aka 3D Megaverse, is here. Very good to see you, buddy. If you don't recognize that name, 3D Megaverse, he is also known as the creator called Fugazi. Very welcome. Welcome to the chat. Very cool. Some very good Substance Painter tutorials on John's channel, by the way. If you do want to get started with Substance Painter, I thoroughly recommend you check that out. I've done some, I was going to say misappropriations to my interface. It looks a little different than the default one, but you'll be able to follow along a little easier. And it's just because we need to click on lots of things, so one of those things. Let me go and import my Necromancer in and hope it all works. I am still, you know, I've had this program for a year and I feel like I'm very, very new to this still. It's a phenomenal application, but it's also one that has me scratching my head time and time again. It's also one of deepest and endless wonders, seemingly. Let's go and create a new project here. File new, and I'm going to go and get started with whatever I was on, actually. Yeah, I'll do that here. PBR Metallic Roughness Alpha Blend. I'm going to export the maps slightly different later anyway. I'm going to stick with all the defaults here for now, and I'm going to go and import my Necromancer that doesn't have materials from here. So I'm going to go and import here Necromancer No Matte, so the low resolution version. I'm going to go and import him. And I'm also going to go and import the maps that have been brought in. It's this in import baked maps under add. That's a new folder that's been created inside my my OBJs folder here. This is where my OBJs are. Daz Studios made this folder here called maps, and these are all the diffuse maps. So no other maps are exported by default, and we don't actually need all of them. We're okay with the arms here. We're going to go with the body. We're going to leave the eyelashes and the eyes as they are, and then we're going to go and use the face and the head and the legs. I've just realized, my friends, I've made a small mistake here, and I'm actually glad I caught that. It is because, how am I going to texture this poor guy? I'm going to go cancel out if his mouth is closed and his eyes are open. There is actually a way to I'm going to go delete him out and start again. I'm so sorry. I'm kind of glad I caught that. So there is something that comes with the Genesis starter essentials, and that's called a UV prep pose, and that's something that will pose your character by splitting his fingers apart, opening his mouth, closing his eyes. So that is actually what I wanted to do. Totally forgot about that step, and then we're gonna have to go and export this out again. We'll be able to do that. Yeah, so it makes the texturing life a little bit easier since we can draw over the eyelids and stuff. So I totally forgot about that. Divide, there is a perpetual license for Substance Painter out there on Steam, so I'm really glad that Adobe do that. And sometimes around about Christmas, I believe, it is about 30% off, so you can pick it up for around $100, which is not bad. Indeed, there it is. Thank you, Brian, for the link. I appreciate that. Indeed, yes. Yes, and usually it's 20 a month for the regular subscriptions. That's the one that I have as well. Okay, so the UV prep pose, let me show you that. I totally forgot that. I'm so sorry about this. It's in your blue Genesis 8 Starter Essentials, and under poses at the very bottom here, you find one for the Genesis female and one for the Genesis male pose. And if you apply that, then you'll see that my man now goes and does this. So a lot of things are happening. So the eyes get closed, but most importantly, the fingers get spread and the mouth gets open. And the nipples also come out. So if you wanted to texture those from the side, you can barely see that with him, but you know, with the women, it's a bit more pronounced. So that also the navel gets brought in so that you have a proper reference there. So there we go. I need to go and export him again. The maps are still the same, so I'm going to go and just go and maybe just go delete that folder here. Delete it. Cool. So Necromancer with mats, first of all, in the UV prep pose. Yes, we're going to go and overwrite that, and I'll just go start again from the Daz Studio preset here. Filter objects, we're going to go and say selected routes, and under maps we're going to go and make a collect maps folder here, and that's number 1. That's that. I don't know, I'm from Europe, does that count? I'm okay, we have nipples in the US, don't worry. Okay, so that's that. Then we go and make my man base res. Then we're going to go and triangulate the mesh. See how much resolution we actually lose. Isn't that amazing? Base res versus HD. You can see all these sculpted in details here. I love the HD characters. Isn't that amazing? Very, very cool. That's in addition to all your normal maps and bump maps and all that. Very cool. So that edit object geometry triangulate. If you don't do that, it'll also work. So don't worry too much about the triangulation. And now we have everything we need. Let's go and import this guy now. Necromancer no mats. And then I'll go and bring in my texture maps here as well under import baked maps. And then I'll go navigate to my folder, and I'm going to go and take his arms, his body, his face, his head, and his legs. With control, I'll just go and bring those in. Substance Painter likes it, and I'm going to go and say, okay, fingers crossed. Just a little open for the AO baking. Clever, Changeling Chick, clever. That is a good idea. So glad you're here. I haven't seen you in a while. Here he is without the mats. So I don't think it matters when you bake the maps that Changeling Chick was talking about. What I do see here, though, is that his pose has not been acknowledged. What's happened here? Anyone know why that is? That is not the mesh I thought I had exported. Interestingly. Right, because I'm thinking... I haven't exported him, that duh, no mats, that's the one. Export, yes, overwrite. That's it. Dang! Okay, let's go, and I think I can go into project configuration and just switch out the mesh. Does that work? If not, we're going to go and start again. Does it work? Yes, there we go. That is the updated mesh. That's the one that I wanted. One of those things. Great. I should have picked that, should have exported that in the first place. So to get these maps baked that Changeling Chick mentioned, that is kind of the Substance Painter's way of being able to decide where roundness is and where shaded pieces are. And so it does a lot of calculations there. And we do that under Edit, Bake Mesh Maps. And we can, I'm going to give it a 2K size here maybe, or maybe just 1K, just so that the baking is a little bit faster. You typically go to 4K here, but it'll take like 3-4 minutes to bake. So I'm going to go and just do this. And then here in this field, you can give Substance Painter the higher res mesh that we had. So I'll go and add that in here as well. That's the Necromancer with mats that had the higher res mesh, and it can use that for baking. So we don't really need all these maps. I'll leave them all intact. I'll just say bake selected textures. And now it goes and bakes one for every Udem tile here. And that is that process happens several times. Pro Lip, hello, how you doing? Don't jinx. Don't jinx it. Come on, let's see if we can do this. Fingers crossed. 100%, that is good news. And he now has additional maps that are important for Substance Painter, and we can, basically we don't really need to know much about them, but we can tell that he now has, he looks like he has the HD detail on it, even though I've only given it the SD or the low resolution mesh, which is kind of nice. So you see all that high res detail that's been baked in. Fairly cool. Okay, let's go bring in or apply the maps to him so that we have skin texture on him. Again, you don't really have to do that if you're happy to paint on a character like this, but you know, for reference, let's just go do that. On the Assets tab, I believe, under All Libraries, you can go to the Project category, and that shows you all the maps that we have here. And you can also import other maps. So if you wanted to bring the normals in, you can do that, and then you see all the normal detail in the viewport. You can do that as well. You just have to find them in your content library. So what I'll do here is I'll go and left click and drag these out and drop them onto the surfaces where they belong. So these are the arms. I'm not going to put them on the face, even though it looks like there's no big difference here. If I put them on the arms, it'll be beneficial for us. We're going to say this is the base color, and a little moment later we can see the arms have been applied. That's cool. When I do the same with the body now, left click and drag that over here, the arms are going to disappear, but that's, you know, that's just how the cookie crumbles. We're going to bring them all back in a moment. This is the face here. Left click and drag on the face. There it is. Then we have the head material. This is the new one for Genesis 8.1 that goes on the back here. Left click and drag that here. That's that, and the neck. And then last but not least, the legs. Left click and drag the legs over to here. Okay, that's all the skin applied, but Substance Painter is going to think, since we have 7 UDIM tiles, it'll apply each of these textures to all the UDIM tiles, and we don't need that. We can tell Substance Painter, I like the legs on the legs, and I like the body on the body, and so forth, and that happens with a way of geometry selection, and that happens on these little squares here. These are all my layers. So Substance Painter has created a new fill layer per texture that I dropped in there. These are the arms, body, face, head, and legs. And these are essentially a way of us to say, where does this texture need to go? So if I go and click this from bottom to top, then I get this menu here. And if I hover over that, I can see that certain parts of my character appear in blue. And that's Substance Painter's way of previewing this is that UDIM tile. So these are my arms, and I can either now go and untick everything except for the arms. So arms are now number 5. I can either untick all of these things here, or if I wanted to be a bit faster about it, maybe on my next zone here, which is the body, hover and find where the body is. I can just go and alt click on that, and then everything else will be unselected and only that will remain. So I like doing that. There's the face. Let's find the face just by hovering. This is that. So alt click that UDIM tile, and then the texture is going to be removed from all the other ones. Kind of handy. It improves performance as well. This one is the head, so that is this. Alt click on that, and last but not least we have the legs, which are these ones here. Okay. Now this appears because I'm still on this square. If you go over to the material now, then we have all the textures that we want to see. So that's a good start. I might go and save my project just so that, you know, nothing can go wrong here. Let's go and do that. Save as. So we don't have to do this work again should the inevitable crash happen. Necromancer is a good name for that. Takes a second. We have one default layer here that we don't actually need. That's a paint layer, so I'm going to go and delete that. And I'm going to go and create myself one fill layer underneath my Necromancer. And I'm going to use that for default properties. And that's just so that I can adjust something that I'd like to have in place for literally all surfaces. So right now what we'll do is this texture is only applied on the color channel here, but I'm not doing anything else in these channels. So like the roughness is a little bit too shiny. I think I'm going to go and bring that down. So I'll make a new fill layer up here, and I'll go drag that to the bottom of the stack, and I'll call that maybe base properties, just so that I remember what that is. And in here, I'm going to go and just use the roughness information. So much like before, Alt-click rough, and then everything else will be deselected. And I can now go and give it a value here, or a map if I want. But I'm going to go and just bring that up a little. So this is super shiny, and this is not shiny at all. So 100% roughness. And I think I might use something like 0.5 or so, that he doesn't look quite that rough. Good. So that I get organized, I'm going to go and put all of these things into a group, selecting them, and I'll say group layers, and I'll call that skin. And now I can just collapse that and focus on my painting. Does that make sense so far? I'm going to get my Wacom tablet ready. It's a nice way to apply paint with a tablet. You can do it with the mouse, of course, as well, but tablet has that extra, comfortable applying paint strokes on it. So this is the creative part now that I'm not actually very good at, but I hope you guys are much better at it than I am. And I'll show you two types of ways that you can apply things. So the easiest way would be to create yourself a new paint layer, and it seems logical to do that. And then you can go and use the square brackets to make your brush a little bigger or smaller, and then you can go and pick a color essentially, or material, and then just start painting all over it. That's essentially how you do that, and it's good enough. But if you wanted to change something about your paint stroke, it would now be too late. So if I'm thinking, okay, I've painted here with color information, and I'm thinking, well, I should have done that with color as well as height, then right now there's really no way that you can do that. You can add height now, and if I make another paint stroke, then height would be applied to it, but my previous paint strokes don't have it, and that's a bit of a problem. Likewise with the color, if you had something like a different color that you paint with, now it applies, but I'm thinking, well, actually that would look good all over, and that's not quite possible with the paint layer. So that's why usually you work with masks and kind of more non-destructive ways of working, from what I gather. So the paint layers still have value when it comes to kind of applying tattoos and all that. You can use those, but I'm gonna go and do something else and maybe just make that invisible, and in fact add a new paint layer. Like this is the thing to work in Substance Painter, from what I gather. Fill layer. Then pick a material for that fill layer. So in my case, maybe just a color. So I'll go and Alt-click on the color. I'll pick a color, let's say green, and then my whole object turns green. That's of course not what I want. I want to have paint strokes that will be green, and the rest of the body should be, transparent as such. So the way I do that is add a mask inside that layer. If the mask is white, all the information is let through, so it'll just be green. If I make a black mask, then it's all masked off, so that means nothing is green until I start painting on the mask. And the mask is then literally a black and white or grayscale kind of picture, and that'll let pieces of that material through. So let's go and do this here under that little first icon here, add paint. That is now not a paint layer in the stack, that is now a paint layer applied to the mask, and by default I'm currently painting with white, so this is the grayscale value here. I'm going to go and make that a bit smaller, and when I do that now, then my underlying material comes through. And so that's kind of the way to work. And you can still erase paint strokes. So I believe you can press X to change the color with which you paint, or you can just adjust the slider if you wanted to paint with kind of less opaque values. X will change between these colors here. So the benefit of that is now if I go and do some painting here on my guy here, if I think, hey, that green isn't actually what I was looking for, you can just go and change the color to something else. Maybe make a different green, or you make a different color altogether. make it something like a lighter blue or whatnot, slightly less saturated. Or you could do something like, hey, I would actually like to have painted with height information or with roughness information. I totally forgot to do that. Then you can just add that to this layer as well, and then make that height come out or go down. So that is why, and it took me literally a year to work that out, that is why we use fill layers and do everything inside fill layers, because it's just more convenient to deal with that. Does that make sense so far? Christina has always been a little paranoid about saving, but good on you. And you know, it's always been very valuable to do that. Indeed, John, fill layer first, black mask in it, do everything that you need to do, and then paint layer at the end. Absolutely, exactly. Ina, no, there isn't. There is, so that's the next thing, of course. Brushes. If we go and head over here to assets, so I'm going to go back into my paint layer, and right now I just have this this little round brush here. So if I head over to assets, I can go to my all libraries here and go into the brush section. This lets me pick a brush essentially, and there's so many brushes that come with Substance Paint here. I'm going to go make that maybe medium, or maybe I'll make that a list here. There's so many brushes. I'm gonna just go and use a charcoal brush because I know that's gonna work quite nicely. Maybe this one here, Kyle's Paint Box French Sharp Block. Let me go and pick that up. That's a bit small. That's big. I'll make that a bit smaller and go start painting with that. So it has height information as well, like I said. Perfect. So I can just do the same thing with my mouse, but the mouse is will only ever have a particular flow value applied as well as a pressure value. So you will always paint with 100% essentially, whereas here I have the option to use pen pressure or not use pen pressure, both for the size as well as for the flow. And if you're painting with a mouse, you have 100% even if that is active. So if I go and switch this, that's on, isn't it? I think that's on. If I go and make that flow smaller, maybe the opacity also smaller, then if I go and press lightly on the tablet, that's a different thing that's applied than when I press heavy on the tablet. I had assumed that is of course not how that works, but that's genuinely the difference between painting with a mouse and with a pen. Does that have to be active? Demonstration effect. Yeah, so usually with the mouse you can only paint with one value, whereas the pen lets you vary that. I don't know why it's not showing up as well as I thought it should, but that's essentially the only difference. So some brushes are designed that they become larger and smaller if you press harder or less hard. Some brushes are designed that they put more opacity on the canvas than when you press lighter. So that lets you vary while you work. So it's also easier to draw something out. So if I try to draw out a circle, like on this guy here, with the mouse, that's kind of difficult. If I try to do the same thing with a pen, that's somewhat more intuitive. So that with the mouse is always a bit jittery. You can actually have, I'll just use your back, buddy, sorry. You can have something called a steady stroke. That Photoshop has that, and Substance Painter has that as well. It's this icon here. If you press that, it's lazy mouse they call it. Then if you do it, especially with the mouse, you end up maybe jittering around a little bit. And if you go and enable that, you see the circle that appears. And that now means that when you paint, the paint stroke isn't actually started unless the darkened circle leaves where your mouse is. So you do this. So as I move my mouse around here like this, if I jitter, my stroke is still fairly steady, and that's because this circle kind of steadies out my motion. So if I switch that off and try to do the same thing, I might end up with something like that. But when I switch that on, you can do this, and even though I'm not trying very hard, the line is very straight and very smooth. So that's another thing that you can do, a little lazy mouse action there. Oh, this is one thing, that's actually my favorite thing. The illumination here in Substance Painter happens with a HDRI, as you may have guessed. And if you press Shift and right click, then you will rotate the dome. So sometimes you just want to see what it looks like from different angles, and just to make sure that you catch all the cavities properly. Or just change the lighting that way. You can swap out the HDRI as well completely, but you know, if you do paint something on the back and you think, oh, that's a bit dark here, Shift right click, and then you just adjust the light dome as you see fit. And let's go and try to do some productive face painting here, if we can do it. Inkscape, yes, I think Inkscape is a vector program. It's a bit like Illustrator in that respect. I'm going to go and delete this layer, and in fact this paint layer as well. We're not going to need it anymore. I'm going to go and create a new fill layer, and that's now going to be the inspiration for one of the face paints here. So fill layer first, then I'm going to go and create a black mask inside it, and then inside that black mask I'm going to create a paint layer, and that will now let through whatever this material is. If we go and look at maybe not Catalu here, if we look at some of the Aloy examples, this might be a good one to begin with. We have white and green, and it's triangles kind of above the eyes, on the eyes and on the chin, and then we have a bit of a white patch underneath here. We should be able to make that happen. How does the eraser work when you're misplaced? It's essentially just erasing a brush stroke. So the eraser is good if you're on a paint layer. If you're on the mask, you can just switch the color with the X button, and then instead of white, you paint with black, which is then going to eradicate the stroke. But yeah, the eraser is here. This is the eraser tool, and that will just get rid of something on a paint layer. I'm not actually sure if I'm okay with this brush, maybe charcoal medium. I'll use that. Just it has, I think it might be beneficial if we paint in our bits and pieces here. Where did I say white and green? So let's go and make this the green layer here. So color, alt click on color, and just pick a color here, and that's going to be, let's say this is my green now. We'll see what that looks like. If it's not the perfect green, we're going to adjust it later. Oh yes, there's something else that you might find helpful. The focal length of my Viewport camera is fairly short, so it appears that his nose is a little overemphasized and there's a lot of foreshortening going on. You can change that in Substance Painter with one of these options here, the display settings. I believe under camera settings, you can change both the field of view in degrees as well as the focal length of your camera. So we're having 17, which is very, very wide angle, and that's not a very flattering look for people. So that's good for interiors and doing props and stuff, but if you're doing people, this might just freak you out a little. So if you do this, if you make that like, I don't know, 100 maybe, and you zoom out, then you've got a much flatter perspective here. So that might make it a bit easier. So this is how I would do a portrait render. I wouldn't necessarily use a short focal length for that. Like 120 to 200 is good for that. It's a bit more flattering because it doesn't emphasize the features at the front that much. So it's, you know, it flattens out the perspective a little bit. It is a PS5 screenshot. Yes, Kemi, it was. And did you know, I've shown this in the beginning, Aloy actually has the vellus hair on her. Very cool. Okay, let's see what we can do here. So that is triangles over the eyebrows here. Let's see what I can do. That might still be a little bit too big. Well, the first thing that I can see is almost the same color, isn't it? It's very, very nice. So the first thing I can see is that we're painting with 100% opacity here, and that might not be what I want. So let me go press X and rub that out again. This is not the eraser, this is now just painting with a different color here. I could have also done Control Z, of course. I think stroke opacity, I might bring that out, down a bit, and actually also the flow value. let's see what this actually, stroke opacity was probably good, but the flow of that, I like for that to be down a bit so that I have a little bit of imperfection going on there. A little more, a little less on this. This looks a bit more natural. If you do it with 100%, it'll be essentially like 100% stuff on there, so that's probably not what we want. Oh yeah, if you can also clear the mask entirely, if you don't want to do that, if you have a lot of stuff you want to rub out, so like the X is good if you wanted to you know, make refinements on something, but essentially leave most of it where it is. So if you wanted to eradicate the mask completely, I think you can, there's a way to right click on this and say clear mask, and that'll get rid of it completely. You'll just have to go and grab yourself another paint layer, and then we can get started again. Oh yeah, since we probably want to have that applied on both eyes, there's also a symmetry option that sometimes works, often works most of the time. So I can try to get that triangle above his eyes, like, you know, twice. Maybe like that. So that's a good start. And there was also something underneath the, or the chin here, underneath the eyes and the chin. Yeah, the symmetry isn't actually in the exact middle where it should be. Oh yeah, Alt, left click and drag in the viewport will let you rotate. Holding Shift will snap it into place. If you wanted to shift that, I mean, it doesn't matter in our case, but if you do want to do that, there's this option here that lets you shift this into the exact spot that you'd like it to be. So if not by moving it, you can also type in, whoops, type in values here. It's still too small a value, too large a value. Yeah, 2.5 is probably what we need to make it super perfect. Point, maybe something else. 0.28 perhaps. No, that wasn't it. Hey, it's close enough for me. This is how you change that. X symmetry. Okay, what did I say? There was something underneath this chin. And with face paint, it doesn't have to be symmetric. It just means I save myself a little bit of time. So I could now literally just go and switch it off and just paint that in manually. Yeah, if that isn't a perfect triangle, let me go and refine that a little with the different color. That'll do the trick. Maybe we'll go and give them a couple of green streaks on here as well. And then there was something underneath the eyes. It's so much fun to just doodle around and see what comes out and dress up your people and give them funky makeup. Let's say that's it. Let's say that's the green part done. Oop. Let's say that's the green part done. And then the white part, that's a different layer. I'm kind of debating whether to put it underneath it or above it. Maybe we'll try it underneath it. So that's a full white, I guess. Triangle at the top and 2 underneath the eyes. Okay, so that's going to be a new fill layer then here. Once again, Alt, select color. And we're going to go and make that not 100% white, but something kind of slightly off-white. Because 100% white, that's a color that's kind of reserved for things like bright spotlights and stuff. But you probably don't want to paint with pure white. Like a very light gray is probably what you need. I can also name that something, so green. And this one's kind of, I'll call that one white. It's my white. It's very white. And then inside there, black mask. And inside there, paint layer. And then I said we want to go and put that underneath the green. That is also just like in Photoshop, just switch the layers around. I'm still painting with the same color here. That's all good. And we'll put, like, yeah, I could use symmetry for this again. Let me go do that. Put little triangles underneath his eyes. There we go. And then one big one, I think, up here. Give him a little white streak on the nose here. Let's say that's it. There. Okay, that's it. Okay, that's it. Let's maybe a third color, maybe a little bit of a red tinge somewhere, perhaps. Or we can also just go and expand the green here for that to go around, a bit like in case of Catalo here. I think Catalo had this all around his head. We can do that. But I think as a first demo, so that we get through something, let's go and try and export these maps out now and see how that works, just so that we can see this masterful creation inside Daz Studio. And save, Brian, that is a very, very good idea. Let's do that. Save as. Thank you so much. I'll say Necromancer V2. Thank you. Good point. Good point. So there's something we haven't quite spoken about, and that is transparency. So for an LIE, it doesn't matter. I can just go and export this out as it is, and this will have an alpha channel. My base color will have an alpha channel, and the LIE will be able to read that, but a Geoshell will not. So let's deal with the LIE first before we speak about transparency more. Actually, no, we have to speak about it now, because if I were to export my maps now, this is what the maps would look like. So if we go edit big mesh maps, and it's not correct, I'm so sorry. It means file export textures. There we go. If we go and do this, let me see if there's anything in my directory. I think there might be my default directory here. I'll go and get rid of that. In my settings here, I can bake out larger maps, smaller maps, whatever I want. I'm going to go and use 4K maps because I happen to know that my original maps are 4K. I'll just go do this. And this is the directory that you can change. I just use this and then copy my maps that I'd like to keep into different places here. I'm going to leave all these in place and literally go and have a look at the list of exports that would be happening right now with my current preset. And it would bake out on a per UDIM basis 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 textures. So we have the base color, the emissive, which I know there's nothing in there. We have height, currently there's nothing in there. Metallic, we probably won't use. Normal I haven't got, and roughness I haven't used really either. So most of these I don't need, but I'll let Substance Painter just bake them out so that we can have a look at them. And then we can have a look at, on a subsequent export thing, what we actually need and what we could discard immediately. Indeed, you know, Changeling Chick, I totally agree. I like the idea of it. I like how easy we can make it get going. But the trouble is performance. Yeah, I totally agree with that. So, output directory. This is what my maps look like. Most of them are black. But also notice how my underlying face texture has been exported. So I could use this and just put it onto my character now if I wanted to replace what's there. But that isn't going to work well because on the 8.1 characters we don't just have a diffuse map that makes the skin shader. So if we look at my man over here, and I'll have a look at the surfaces and just maybe select the face. Then we have under base, we have the base color here. So that is essentially where that would plug into, but we also have the translucency color, and that is not that's not the same map as this. So if you look at it closely, it does actually look a little bit different. So I can't plug the same map in there because it would mean the face would look different to the rest of the body. So even though it would kind of work, whoops, if I just left click and drag this map here into the base color now, it would technically change, and in filament it's probably going to look okay. But as soon as I switch this over to iRay, I have a feeling I'm going to see a different type of color there. And that is why just applying the textures like this is not a good idea. I could go and put my map into translucency, but this is going to be messy, and there's no real separation now between my skin texture and the face paint that I've created. So really what I need to do is and that's what the layered image editor comes in handy, I need to leave the base color in place. In fact, Control Z is probably going to do that. Yeah, there we go. That's my original one again here. And I'm going to go and add this with the layered image editor here. So that allows me to put a second layer on top of that. But of course, then the white elephant in the room is the textures contain skin, they're not transparent, and that's again where these base properties as well as my my layers come in handy. So what I'd really like to do is switch off the skin like that. Technically that gives me no skin, but now it gives me that gray, so that's also not what I want to do. So really what I want is on my base properties here, I'd like to go and add an opacity channel. So currently I'm only dealing with the roughness here, but if I add an opacity channel as well, I can go and control this. So white means this is going to be showing, and black means it's going to be invisible. And that is kind of what I want. So I want the skin to disappear, and I can set that in my base properties here. The trouble now, of course, is that my face paint also disappears, which is kind of also not really what I want. I'd like for that to stay, and for that I need to tell both these fill layers to have also an opacity channel, and currently I don't have that. I only have a base color in the white and in the green, but no opacity. Thankfully it is a fill layer, so I can just go and add that here as well. So I'll go and say opacity, and you want to be white. The green here also wants to be white. If I wanted to make that less transparent, I can fiddle with that. Even better, I can just bake it out as 100% solid and then make refinements in Daz Studio on the shader. And now if I go and go back to the base properties and bring my opacity channel here to black, then I should see my face paint remains, which is great. That is what I want. It'll also look a little wonky, and that's because the base properties here, there's nothing shining through underneath it. It does actually look a little better when your base properties also have a medium gray color value here. So that versus that is not noticeable now, but when we go and come to export it, I'm going to leave this here like the medium gray, maybe make it a little darker. Something like that. I think that should work. Okay, let's go and export those maps out again. Same as before. So File, Export Textures. I'll leave everything as it is and hit Export. So for an LIE, this should work. Indeed, Swords for Two. How you doing? Good to see you. Can you turn off the color info from the base layer? I think so. Yes, you could. Yeah, you could do that too. Exactly. Yeah, that is. If you do that, I think this. Yeah, you could just go and turn that off. Is that what you mean? I don't know if we need it here or if we need a different layer. Well, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. So back to my maps. They now have transparency information in it. That's kind of what I want for that. So it's slightly difficult to see in the Windows image viewer here, but yeah, whatever's gray is now transparent. So now I'll go and use the layered image editor, and that's in the base color right now. This is what Changing Chick and I were saying earlier about the performance. It'll take a while to get this going. Swords for Two, if you do have Substance Painter, it is a wonderful tool to play with. So yeah, this is it here. And here we can add a new layer. So hit the plus button, add layer, and since our thing already has transparency in it, I can go and bring it in here, and resource, and do I remember the path? Yes, I do. That's nice. Good stuff. So that is it. Necromancer Nomads. And there it is overlaid now. Very cool. So you can go and turn the opacity down. Doesn't happen immediately, but because I think Daz Studio has to kind of physically create one new texture and then put that on the surface there. So we can do that here, but its performance isn't great. Once you have it, if you hit accept, it'll take a moment. Eventually it'll settle down, and then also because we have a translucency color, we need to do the same thing in the translucency channel as well, so that it looks handsome in Iray. There is that. If we go over to Iray, I think we'll probably see something similar to what we had before, that we see kind of a hint of the face paint there, but not the full Monty. There we go, exactly. So we need to do the same layered image thing in the translucency color here. It's actually good to demonstrate where is that. These are the maps that you check. Image editor is just the whatever map is applied, and layered image editor is technically programmed, I think, like a plugin. If you click that, then you get this new dialog. Eventually. Yes, Helen, absolutely. The recording, thank you, Julia. The recording will be available, and it'll stay here on YouTube. So if you've missed it, I'm going to go and make chapter points on the YouTube recording, and it'll remain here forever and a day. So the chapter points make it easy for you to find which section we're in. It's also going to be, there's also a little gear icon at the bottom right that lets you change the kind of image resolution as well as how fast I talk, how fast I explain things. So you can make me slower, you can make me faster. I tend to watch me at twice the speed because I know what I've said. So same map here. And this is still in the default directory. So ideally, when we come to create that, we need to go and really save our maps somewhere else. But we'll deal with that at the end. You can also rename this here, so you don't have to keep it at new layer. You can just call it face paint. And then you know what it is. Hit accept. And then once again, another moment later, the render should look okay now. That's the plan. Is there an easy way to paint geographed seamlessly too? Like a fantasy geograph? There should be. So if you go and export those together, then there we go. Now it looks fairly handsome there. Light could do with a little change, but we see that's kind of, you know, it's getting there. It's getting there. So yeah, if you export a figure plus a geograph attached, then they become one merged OBJ, but they retain their individual UV unwrapping, and Substance Painter will understand that, I believe. Ideally, they would be on different UDIM tiles in different UDIM spaces rather than overlapped. So that might be an issue. Do you know what? I'm going to give it a go and see what I can come up with. We can, if I figure out if there's any steps that are special to that workflow, I'm going to make a little video out of it. Good thing, Blythe. Good idea. So if this were our LIE, and I don't think it is just yet because the face paint here looks a little too dark, and that's, I think we need to export that medium gray as well, and we don't have that on the base channel because that was invisible. So I think there's another step that we need to, that we've kind of forgotten there, and it'll be more clear when we do this with GeoPaints, with Geoshells, I think. It will do, yes, Ina, absolutely. It will do with, it will just work with literally any object. So ideally, this would have a little bit more white information underneath it, and we did not export that. I currently can't remember how to do that, but I think think that has to do with the actual transparency map we do later with geoshells. Because this looks a little too dark for me. I mean, it looks okay, but it doesn't look as white as I'd like it to be. Take off the opacity on the base layer. Just make it pop through a little. I could do that. So rather than do this, I could. If I do that, then we're not getting a clean opacity. There was a trick, I just can't recall what that was now. It's essentially another layer somewhere. Man, I can't remember. That is annoying, isn't it? It's something that basically adds, instead of the skin, that adds the opacity back, but only on these places. So if I do this, then we don't get a clean cutout. Do you know what I'm saying? So that white needs to be literally there underneath underneath this. But I've forgotten how to do it, I'm afraid. I've forgotten how to do it. Maybe it will become clear if we do this again as a geoshell. Let's try that. Let me go and just secure these maps. It's just this one here, really. I'm going to go and copy this out and put it into my face painting stream here. I'll go and make a new folder, and I'll just call this maps 1, perhaps. And I'll just go and paste that into here, because the moment we export new maps, these things are just going to go disappear, and you know, that's not good. You know, with can you imagine seeing that, and it has emissive values as well, and it glows at you. You can add the alpha in the export template, indeed, and leave the background white. Aha, perfect. So I think that's what we're going to do next, actually, because if we were to do something other than the LIE, if we wanted to do this with a geoshell, let me show you how that would work. So maybe I'll go and actually load my necromancer in again, like brand new guy again with open eyes and stuff. Maybe I'll do that. And should I save this? Now the maps aren't in the right place. I should really replace those here. Let me go do that. Layered image editor. I'll just go and point them to the directory that I've saved them in, so that when they get overwritten, you know, we have a before and after here. I can also show you how to save an LIE preset, and then we'll see how we can make this happen with a geoshell instead. If Daz Studio is willing. We don't exactly know. Currently, there it is, perfect. So face paint, I'm just going to go and change out the map here. Should have thought about that before. But of course, it's one of those things. So maps 1, this is that same image, so we don't see anything different. It's just this is gonna be retained here. Yeah, this just needs to be needs to have that white blended in there. We'll work it out. We'll work out how to do that. So that's number 1. I'll do the same thing over here on the base color, and then I can save it out as literally as an LIE template, or as an LIE preset. And the cool thing is, when you do that, Daz Studio knows which of your channels have an LIE on there, and it'll only offer to save those. So it's not going to save everything. It's just going to save the stuff that actually has an LIE applied, which is kind of nice. Right. Oh, lights dim all across America, and when he turns it on, that is actually true. Yes. All across Florida, at least. I'm going to go and call this face paint as well here. I don't actually have that much of a powerful system. It's good, I gotta tell you, it's a good system. And there we go, that's in maps 1, perfect. It's just for reference, I have a dual Xeon workstation with the E5 2670 processors, I think 2 of them, 2 Xeon 2670 processors. I have 48 gigabytes of RAM. I have a 1200 watt power supply, and come on, yes, perfect. And I have 2 RTX 2080 graphics cards. Let me go and put that into your body paint promo. Cool. So you can either use this little plus icon here and head over to layered image preset. That'll save that with your character selected. Or you can go and use the file save as dialog. Same thing, layered image presets. If I go and put this in here, then it'll go into this directory already. And then a little dialog comes up that says, where do you want to save it? I'll save it here. So I'll say Facepaint 1 LIE, just so that I know what that is. And this is what I meant when I said Daz Studio kind of offers you up where that is. So it's in the face surface, it's nowhere else because we haven't applied that there. In there it's in the base channel, in there it's inside the diffuse, and in there it's in reflection under base color. It recognizes that that's where one of them is, and the other one is in translucency color. So if you save that, then it takes a second. But the beauty now is that you can load in a different character and then apply the face paint on there. And that is, once again, that is where that little performance hitch kind of comes in. So if I use the Genesis male 8.1 male def load, for example, or just the regular male figure, then that's a different character, but he can wear the same LIE preset. So that's kind of a good way of saving it. Geoshells is going to be even better. I'll show you how to do that in a second. I thought it had its own power plant. They're very funny. Yes, exactly. So they're different character. And in here, we go and double click that and hope for the best when... Oh yes, performance. That was a problem, wasn't it? So we need to just kind of wait for LIEs to pop into place. As we said. Yeah, but then you don't have full control, Kemi. And you also aren't as proud as, you know, making this stuff from scratch. That is one downside. But yeah, you will be quicker. There we go. So now it is applied and it's on a different character. So that's kind of cool. So geoshells, let's talk about geoshells. And they are a thing that we can create in Daz Studio. And can I go and Control Z? Yeah, there we go. I'll go and use the male guy for that and just go make one. If I do that under, am I zoomed in? Yes, I'm zoomed in on it. There we go. I'm zoomed out now. So if we go and create one under Create Geoshell, New Geometry Shell, then it goes and offers to parent this thing to a man. That's cool. The label, we can call it something else a little bit later. By default, it's just a character and followed by shell. So I'm probably going to call this something like face paint and then hit accept. Then we see that the face paint now appears as its own object here in the layer stack or in the scene tab. We also see that our character is now completely white. And if I switch that off, the whiteness goes away. And if I switch that back on, then the whiteness comes back. And that's a little disconcerting and confusing when you get started with geoshells. There's also this thing, if you zoom in really closely, you can see that there's a little gap between the actual figure here and the geoshell. But that's kind of how they work. They work as a... Can you see that here, that little gap there? They essentially are an instance of the same figure, and they come with an offset that's kind of by default outside the figure, and they follow the same surface zones and groups that the original figure has. So if I select my face paint geoshell here, I might call that actually face paint geoshell so that we know what that is. Face paint geoshell. If I head over with that selected to surfaces under face paint geoshell, I can see that all these zones exist just like they did on the Genesis figure. They also slight trouble here. If I open them up, I can see they're not actually iRay properties right now. They are 3D Light properties. And I guess by default, it comes in with 3D Light properties. So we need to go and switch that over to iRay properties. And then we can apply the same PBR maps to the Geoshell that we could apply to a character. But the benefit is that we have a completely independent and reset material that we can tweak if and how we want. So this is easy to now import height information into the mix as well. So that would be difficult to mix the height with a regular character texture. So with the Geoshell, you can do it. It's no problem. So let's go and prepare that then with all these surface properties selected. I'll leave arms open just for argument's sake here. I'll head over to presets and I'll head over to shaders, and in iRay, I just click this one here, iRay Uber Base. That's the first one that comes up. And that'll now switch the properties to the iRay Uber Base material. So under base, we can now see that I have my glossy roughness here, and under base, I can put my my maps in here. And then there's the metallicity maps and all that. I can put that in and so forth. And then there's the cutout opacity on the geometry channels, just like I like it. So Geoshells are nice in that we don't have to provide all these values here. We can go and disable them on the materials that we don't want to use them on. So the eyes, for example, we didn't do anything with the arms, we didn't do anything with the body. So we can switch those things off, and then the Geoshell isn't going to be rendered on those parts. That happens with the Geoshell selected on the Parameters tab under Shell. You have two options here under visibility. You have the surfaces and you have the face group. So these follow the character. And under surfaces, I can switch off the stuff I don't want, like the arms. Let's switch those off. And then that goes back to the default material because the Geoshell around it is no longer shown. So body, I might leave that on. Cornea and the ears, I haven't, have I used the ears? I don't remember. I'll switch it off. Eye moisture, eye socket, face I'll leave on. Fingernails, head I'll leave on. Head, we didn't actually do anything with the head, did we? Head I'll switch off. Forget the head. Switch off the head. We didn't do anything with the legs, or the irises, or the lips. I can't remember. I'll leave the lips on. The mouth, the pupils, the sclera, and the teeth, or the toenails we didn't touch. So those are now not geoshelled. Only the body and the face and the lips are geoshelled. So if we were to go and put our, go back to our surface settings, if I wanted to select the Geoshell material, let's make the Genesis figure unselectable here. The Geoshell is unselectable right now. So if I go and pick a surface now, it'll pick whatever's underneath the Geoshell. I'd like to tweak whatever's on the Geoshell, so I'm going to go and switch that on. And I'm going to go and make the Genesis figure unselectable, like so. And now this is the face of the Geoshell that is being selected here. So now I could go ahead in base color and just use that that material that we've got here under maps 1. Let's go and add that in here, and it goes and comes up, it kind of presents itself on there. But there's a lot of other stuff going on, which is not what I want. So I have a different glossy value, and you know, it's also not quite as strong as it was before. So that is adjustable. Under geometry, cutout opacity, I can make that 100%. But therein I'll see another problem now. So that my face paint looks good, but if I make it 100% opacity, I see that there's no transparency in here. And that's kind of an iRay thing, I believe, in order for us to have something that cuts this out and only lets the face paint through, we need an opacity map. And currently we don't have one. So that is something we need to make. Either in Photoshop you can make that, or you can ask Substance Painter to create that. And let me see if I remember how to do that. Let's go back to Substance Painter. And that has to do with the export settings, I believe. So let's go and head over to export textures here. And I'll go and head over to my output templates. I believe I'm currently using the PBR metallic roughness as an output template. So I need to go and tell it here, this is a really confusing dialog. It's on Amazon Lumberyard by default. It is, what I'm using is this one here, PBR Metallic Roughness. So I can go and get rid of maps that I don't need here. For example, the metallic map I'm not using, or the normal maps I'm not using, so I'll get rid of that. Maybe the emissive map I'm also not using, so I'll get rid of those. And I'll add myself, maybe I'm going to use those later, so I'm going to leave those in place. I'm going to add myself another map that we currently don't have. So the way this works on these templates here, you can make yourself one, you can adjust something. That is what you then go and export here with this output template here. So on my thing, I'm going to tweak this PBR Metallic Roughness here, and if you delete something, it'll come back on the next session, so don't worry too much about it. I'm going to go and create myself a new grayscale map. So this would be an RGB map, like a color map, and this is a grayscale map. The opacity maps are basically black and white as well as gray, so we need a grayscale map. I'm going to call that one opacity. Also spell it correctly, J, opacity, there we go. And this is currently saying it's a gray map, but it's also saying I don't have anything in there right now. So you can pick something from the list, like in our case, the opacity value, and then left click and drag that over into here. And then that is what value is being rendered. If I let go, I can say, do you want the opacity from the gray channel or from the alpha channel? And I believe we need to select the gray channel, but I'm not entirely sure if that's going to work. Let's just try that. I think it was a gray channel. And Brian is absolutely correct that before you mess around with something here, you can go and make a duplicate like this and then set up your own template. And thankfully, if you don't do that, this will come back in its entirety and Substance Painter will not remember changes you've made to existing templates. I believe for that you have to make a duplicate and then it will remember that. Let's go and export this now. It'll show us here that the opacity map has been added to the list of exports and other bits and pieces have been removed. Let's see what happens. Let's go export, see what happens. The Chris is here. How you doing, buddy? Okay, output directory. Let's see how our opacity map has fared. There it is. This is kind of what I was looking for, wasn't it? Yes, black where I want transparency, white where I want stuff to shine through. So that is kind of what I want, isn't it? Let me copy this out so that I reference the correct map today. Paste that in here. Just call it, it's just opacity is not a good name, but we know what it is. Let's see what happens if I put that into my cutout opacity channel inside the face now. You can also left click and drag it in there. We can see that I have face paint. We see the same thing, so I need that white underneath that there. So I'm sure we can work it out. I have a project that I can dig into, and we'll see what happens there. So something else that you'll see with the default setting of the Geoshell. Also the lips here, I need to go and copy the face material onto the lips, is that you may see a little bit of a shadow when you have single paint strokes. And that's because by default, the Geoshell is a little bit too far away from the actual base mesh, and that is so that by default it avoids collision. So you don't want to have them in the same space because that'll be a lot of Z fighting there. So you want the Geoshell to be a little bit further away from your figure. But the default is a little bit large. So let me show you how to change that. So on the Geoshell here, under parameters, there is, under general, there is a mesh offset value, and this is what it is by default, 0.1. I believe if I reset that, it goes to 0, and that's not going to be great because it means the Geoshell is now in the same place as my mesh. But so that is what happens, and that doesn't look good. You can see the eyeballs popping through. That's not good. That's not good. Also, Daz Studio is about to, now there we go. So the default was 0.1, I believe. And that was too much. So I say smuggle 0 in the front here and make it 0.01. And then watch what happens to this gap here. That is now perceivably in the same spot, so the face paint is directly on the character, but in calculation terms it is still far enough away that, you know, we can use it, so we're all right. Face paint on a geoshell. You can now go and do little blendings in, so if you think this is a little bit too much, you can go and head back over to your surfaces tab under the cutout opacity and not set that to 1, set that to something a little lower, like 0.9, maybe perhaps 0.8, something like that, and that'll mean that the skin is shining through there a little bit, so you can be very granular with that and just see how much underlying skin material you want to see, how much you want to blend that in. And then of course, you know, this now has the default values applied, so if you want to make that more shiny, less shiny, you have full control just over the face paint, and that's kind of nice. So that's under glossy roughness. Sums where's glossy, there is roughness, so make that 0.5 or make that, you know, make that completely unshiny, 0.9. So the other cool thing about geoshells is that you can now do other things. So if you're thinking you wanted to add a little bit of height variation and you didn't paint that in, you can kind of smuggle in that that opacity map and just use that as a grayscale map. That's kind of cool. So if you wanted to put this into bump or displacement, I think either will work. Let's put that in here, put that, and maybe to 2. See what happens. Does anything happen? Yeah, I can see some additional variation now popping in there. 2 might not be enough if we just make that a bit bigger. Then you just see that effect. Look, this looks like crackled paint now. That is just very, very cool. And then I'm looking back at the Horizon characters and I'm thinking, hey, this is exactly what they've done, isn't it? So yeah, this is how you can do it with Genesis characters as well. Super, super cool. Super exciting. I really like that. It is, isn't it? Displacement is a little wonky in Iray, I agree, but that also would sometimes work in tandem. Let's try that. That's under the geometry channel. Displacement you could try using the same map here, so also the opacity map. Let's not go overboard here. There we go. And then you can have the sub D, make that a little larger so you have more subdivision here. But yeah, look, almost looks like snow now. But yeah, also possibility. Kind of depends what you need. I probably put it in the bump channel. And see what exciting values you can come up with. I mean, you can paint this in as well with alphas and then export and literally use a height map for that from Substance Painter. Maybe that's a bit much here. Maybe 5 was kind of cool, wasn't it? The lips, they can just have the same value as the face. So we'll copy that, put it onto the lips. Same with the ears. I think the ears we just switched that geoshell off. But yeah, that is how that works. Very cool. And now, of course, how do we save that out? So how do we make this geoshell available on other characters like the Necromancer? And that's a wearable preset. It's not quite, it's not as intuitive. We don't have a way to say file save as geoshell, but technically this is something that the figure wears, so maybe you can remember it that way. And I think I'm going to go and switch the body off here because we don't need to see that. We didn't do anything on the body after all. That visibility off. Let's go and put that in here with the geoshell selected. Actually, with the character selected, I believe. You have to select the character and then say this little plus icon here, wearable preset. And I will say face paint geoshell. Little dialog pops up that says what is it that you'd like to save as a wearable preset, and I'll say not the tear ducts or the eyelash here. I'm just going to have this, and that's it. Hit accept, and that does that. So now, just to prove a point, if we go and delete Mr. Genesis default guy out and use our Necromancer HD again, see what our face paint looks like on him with the Geoshell. Oh, is that so? I didn't know that, Changeling Chick. Thank you. That is exciting. That is a very good tip. That is a very good tip. That keeps the file size down. That is very nice. It also avoids you accidentally redistributing something that you didn't want. That's a very clever idea. Oh, cool. Thank you. This is what I love about us coming together and working these things out together. Let's go share some knowledge. Let's become better artists. I love that. Always appreciate these little tips. Let's go double click that face paint. This is only going to work for 8.1 characters now. So if you have an 8.1 Geoshell, it needs to be on an 8.1 character. If you wanted the same thing for an 8.0 character, you have to set up a new Geoshell. There, and that works. Does that work? Come on. And that is the bundle indeed. Yes, if you guys are interested in picking that up, it's a very cool bundle. It is large. There's a ton of stuff in there. Yeah, so already actually I don't need the thing I was worried about earlier there. This actually works perfectly fine as a Geoshell on any 8.1 character. Hey, this is cool. We have about perfect. We have about half an hour left, so we can either do another type of face paint, or I could have a look at questions and see what you guys are saying, see if there's anything that I can potentially help with. Mods, I do like the crossed out thing. That is very, very cool. I really like that. That is much more intuitive than the icon that we've been using before. Diaval, sorry. Can Substance Painter also create tears on clothing? That'll be, to a certain extent, yes. You could add alphas to make that happen. If you had something that would suggest like a torn in bit, that would be a way to fake it. I think you'd probably be looking rather at something like a... It's tricky. I mean, it can do things like almost believable rivets that are not three-dimensional at all. Those are just things on hard surfaces. They are possible rips. I pass, I'm afraid. I don't really know, but it's something to look into, definitely. I don't know if it can do it believably. I think you might be better off modeling those things in. Pro Lip, if we want to export the Substance Painter model to Daz 3D, will that be possible? Yes, we have just done that. So, and then also more importantly, how do we make it, how do we save it so that it's available on other characters? Yes, that is totally how it works. And I'm using the default HDRI, John. Absolutely, yes. Will Substance Painter make my model skin more realistic? It kind of depends what you do with it. So you can do things like you can create your own skin textures in Substance Painter. That's something I'm currently trying to work on. Let me see if I have a thumbnail here of something I can show you. I've just uploaded a little demo of that principle on my YouTube channel. It has a thumbnail that looks like this. And so on one hand, you can use Substance Painter to paint with the stencil. So like use stencil painting and use, this was like a two-dimensional photo that you can then rub on to figures, and then you can basically just like a regular projection painting, just project the stencil and keep rubbing it onto the whole figure until you have all the skin detail. But Substance Painter has this cool thing called a warp projection as well, and that allows you to not constantly move the stencil and the 3D viewport. It allows you to project an image onto the figure and then add these little vertex points and then change where those things are so that the picture looks okay on the 3D model, because they might not match. Let's do tears in clothing, yeah? If I figure it out, I'll totally let you know how to do that. Can we see your render settings? Well, absolutely. They are just the defaults. They are... I can talk a little about render settings. So on the tab here, what I tend to do, Under general, I give in my size here, whatever I want to render. Under progressive settings, I tend to switch the render quality off. So that is I think the default is this, and I tend to set my render quality to off. And that means Daz Studio isn't going to stop when it reckons the render is cooked. It'll stop when this value is reached, or when that value is reached. So assuming that this value, this is I think 2 hours here, assuming this value isn't reached, I then have something usually like around 1,000 that I let it render. Sometimes for preview renders I would set it down to something lower, so I would do this like 100, and then I'd go and let it render and see how it goes within those iterations. I'd also go and put the denoiser on. So that's always something I do, and 100 is good for a preview render. 1,000 is fairly decent for something you want if you're in a hurry, and then something higher like 2,000 to 5,000 without render quality. That should give you an excellent result, depending on how difficult your scene is or how much geometry is in your scene. And this is with the default HDRI. So typically I would go and put a better one in there. And that's it, 100 iterations. If that isn't good enough, I can go into this little tab here and head back over to progressive and say, well, maybe I want to see this with 500 iterations. And then I can just go and press the resume button here, and that will go, oh man, sorry, I was zoomed in, wasn't I? There we go. I can go and press the resume button, and now my first 100 iterations won't be deleted. They will just be appended upon. So now Iray starts rendering at iteration 101 and goes all the way through to 500. And if that's still not good enough, I can go and increase that and just keep improving my render. What you can't do with this workflow is you can't save it in between. You can't do that. So I can't save this out now. Actually, maybe I can. Let's see what happens when it's finished. Same with canceling. If you want to cancel something and then resume the render, you can do that too. I think, can't I just go and say file, save last render? Where was that? Last render, there we go. Does that do that? Just out of curiosity. Yes, that does that as well. So that also saves that interim result there. That's kind of nice. You can do that too. And now if you want to, whatever, post that on social media and you think, hey, actually for my archive, I need for that to have more iterations, you go resume, and then the 500 aren't discarded. They're just being, appended upon. Yes, that does happen, Changeling Chick, yes. Yes, you can. Oh yeah, for veins, can you add veins? Yes, absolutely. You can do that in Substance Painter. Let me see if I can show you that quickly. If we go and close this, that would be, I think that would be a good one for a paint layer. Let me go and make that. Bring that back. In fact, bring all this back here. While Daz Studio is rendering, I'm having a bit of an issue here with Substance Painter. The moment it stops, it'll be all hunky-dory again. There. So skin, that's here. Veins, that's a good idea for a paint layer here. And with that, you might have something. Put that on the top here. With that, maybe we'll go something dark blue, purple, whatever your vein color is supposed to be. And that's where particle brushes can really shine. So in here, this is no normal paint layer now, so this doesn't have a mask right now. If you go and under brushes here, you find something like cracks. I think that's a good idea. Cracks. I think this orange icon will denote that this is in fact a particle brush. Do you know what it's called, Brian? So I do like veins here, and this already looks fairly cool. And I think make that a bit smaller and go and That's actually more cracks here. And I'm also painting with height. I didn't mean to do that, but you can. So just switch on color and give this that purpley red color I was kind of thinking about. Whatever your veins need to look like that. Veins. Ugh. I mean, he's a necromancer and everything. Yeah, so that works. You can paint in exciting detail with the height alphas as well. I mean, like what happened more or less accidental here. If I were to also add the height value and paint with something that goes in, and not only is this now painting with red, it's also painting in kind of the height here. If you want to play with that, that's neat. But you can do some really cool things, like anything from rivets to stuff that really looks like proper three-dimensional geometry, but you're not changing the geometry of your object. You know, you just add that as a height map or as a normal map. So there's a way to export these details either as that height map information, or you can turn this into a normal map and then use that as a normal map. So that works as well. Dark color for veins, yeah, indeed, yeah. Kenny, can you swap out the paint on Genesis 8.1 female figures too? You can, but the UVs are slightly different. So if you use the same UVs, if you add this particular one to the Genesis female figure, you'll have some distortions there. I think, let me just check if you can change the UVs on these from male to female. No, that would, you would need the UV swap for that. If you have that installed, I believe then you will have another UV set here, which is the Genesis 8 female, and then you can set that to female, and then that'll work. Like, so it will actually work on 8.0 figures, because we have the Geoshell has that 8.0 base male thing here. So let's test it out. Let's switch you off. So I don't have the UV swap product installed, I believe. But if I go and say anyone who's a Lee 8, that's a good idea. Let's go use Lee 8. He's not an 8.1 figure, but I think we can still use our Geoshell information. Let's try it out. Do you know, and in fact, John has a really good tutorial on how to change that from into a normal map. Brian, if you can dig out John's YouTube channel and give him a shout out, that'd be really, really good. So Lee 8, Geoshell on top of you. Since we only have the face, it probably looks okay, but just in case it does not, you'd go and grab the Geoshell, and on the Geoshell, you'd select all the materials, look for UVs, and it actually already has made the adjustment by itself. So actually, yeah, perfect. That's even better. So I didn't have to do anything manually. That's very cool. So it already has the 8 male UVs auto-selected. I do like that. Very cool. I think the visibility has not been saved. So like what Changeling Chic said, if you go and remove those before you save it, that's fairly cool. Then you don't have to do that. Body. Where's body? Fingernails. Face. Face is good. Eye socket off. Lips good. Well, torso. There we go. Torso off. Sweet. Same thing on here. Paint the 8 UVs right. Cool. Right. Yes. I mean, since it's fairly easy to redo that. Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's probably what I would do. Good to know that it actually works out of the box, though. That's very, very nice. Thank you, Brian. Exactly. Thank you, Christina. Indeed. Thank you. Forgot that you're a mod here as well. It's so nice to have you back. You know, you're welcome back anytime, and take as much time as you need. It's just wonderful to see you. Is there anything else we want to talk about, or have we talked about it all? I think I've gone through most of the questions that I see on the list. Can you render your models in Substance Painter? Actually, yes, that is something that you can do, and that's kind of cool. It has, in fact, has the Iray render engine in it. That's quite impressive. So that is quite neat. So that is over here, I believe. No, that's here. This is it. That's the rendering in Iray, and it works by swapping out this whole viewport here, and it will let you set up a different HDRI. It'll let you set up things like your cameras and all that. So for preview renders, this is a bit like how Keyshot works. And I think you can still rotate this around. Yeah, you can. So he's out in the wilderness, and you can see that as the HDRI that we get here. If we wanted to give him a bit of light from the front or from the side, you can do that. So yes, you can do that, and then you can set up proper render dimensions, I believe, in here. You can also, if you want to show the ground, not show the ground, or sphere with ground, if you just want to see the sphere, you can also switch off the dome. Post effects, there it is. So if you do that, and you can have tone mapping, just like how we know and love it from Daz Studio. Add more exposure here, add a vignette if you want, and I think depth of field is also classed as a post effect. So this is where that is. Depth of field, disable Iray depth of field when enabled. What? Aperture, oh yeah, that's the only thing that's a bit weird here. Aperture at 0 means it's currently not showing it, but then, so these are not photography apertures here, they are just values. So you just dial in a value and see if you're happy with the kind of blurriness value there. Focal distance you can play with as well. It's a little tricky to set up, but you'll recognize all these values when you're coming from Iray. So yeah, that's where they are. That is where they are. Including the render settings here, so you can say max samples, min samples. It always uses the denoiser by default. There we go, max time 10 seconds, so it'll stop after that. Yes, that is how you do that. And then if you want to go back into the 3D view, I think it's this. I think. It takes a moment. Or not. I don't remember. There we go. Yeah, so that's how that works. Cool, I think that is pretty much all I have for you then. Morning without coffee, yes, exactly. That is pretty much all I have for you right now. If you do have other questions, though, then don't hesitate to leave them down below in the comments. And from time to time, I do check these live streams, and I'm happy to respond there. I'll have a look into the torn clothing. That is something that I'm actually interested in as well. See if we can just stamp that in. There's so many other things. Oh yeah, one other thing before I leave. Can we do tattoos with this? Yes, there's a different type of paint mode that I haven't talked to you about just before we leave. That I'm going to switch this layer off, and that's also a paint layer that I'm making. Just a quick projection thing. I'll do that on a regular paint layer as well. So this one was the paint mode that we've used here, but there's also this mode here, which is the projection mode. And if I use that, then I can basically, whatever this white square is, I can now go and rub something on to my figure, like in this case the color channel, but it could also be something like the height channel. So if I go and how do I do that again? That works with not the alpha. The alpha needs to stay as it is. Was it that? I think. Yes, I think I need to go and import my picture that I want to draw with into here. I happen to have one prepared, I think, under tattoos here. I have the cute little skeleton guy and a brush. Well, maybe the skeleton guy is cool, since he's a necromancer. I'll go and import that. I'll say that's a texture, and that's just going to be for my necromancer project. Import. And I can switch this over to my project, and then I have Grim here, and I think I go and left click and drag this into here, I believe. And here is my guy now. This is essentially now a stencil, so I can go Alt left click to do my viewport here. With Shift it'll snap into place, and I think if I press S, is that going to change the size of my stencil here. A middle mouse button will position it, and I think Control, or this left click will move it around like so. Perfect. So let's say I go and put this onto him now. I just go and left click and drag over him, I thought, if it's actually in the right position, which it might not be. It's underneath the skin. Duh, there we go. I can go and draw my guy in now. Maybe he has a skeleton tattoo on his body. Yeah, that's transferred that. So this is also how you do regular texture painting. If you had skin references that you want to put on here, if you think this is not quite as good resolution as it could be, that's the preview. So you can change this to something larger, and then Substance Painter will have to kind of recalculate the size of all the maps. It takes it a little bit of time. The green arrow here comes out and redoes all these things, and then all these little jaggies go away. There we go, higher res, and you can set it to 4K, but as you do that, then the viewport's kind of, you know, is gonna suffer. So that's how you'd apply tattoos as well, just with the stencil here. So Substance Painter can do that as well. And the wall projection, yeah, that's something else. I'm going to make a little more in-depth tutorial on that, maybe even here on the Daz channel, how we can go and use one of those flat faces and match that onto the Genesis character, and then also blend that in with existing skin textures, so that we essentially, at least for the face and maybe for some parts of the body, create our own very, very customized skins. I think that was it. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. It's been a blast. I'll be back in about 2 weeks on the Daz Plus stream. I believe Fugazi and I were cooking something up that'll be quite interesting. Topic to be announced. I have other things in the pipeline. Tomorrow on my own channel, I'm going to make something funky with Blender. It's either going to be an animated book that I'd like to have a look at, or it was procedural buildings that I'd like to place and just make a little scene out of it, a little camera animation that goes through there. One of those things. Join me for that. That's at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. My friends, thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of Saturday. I will see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.